Okay, hi everybody. This is Max and June. Hi June,
Hi, Max.
doing time outside the fence, and you're a pair up side by side. Today we're going to talk about an American marriage. So it sounds like a romance. And it is about romance, but yeah. So so June, you haven't heard of the book before. You've been reading a bunch of books lately. I just finished it a week and a half ago. It's a fairly short book. Well, I listened to it. I didn't read it. Um,
I'm curious to hear a brief synopsis of what the book's about and what topics it discusses.
well, let's see. So I downloaded. So yeah, some of the information because some of it's very specific. Tarari Jones wrote the book, and it's about a marriage the relationships between Celeste, Andre, and Roy. Celeste and Andre were close friends growing up, and then they show up again at the end of the book. But it's about the prison, the impact of prison basically on marriage is one of the themes that it talks about.
I can't even imagine being in a relationship and having to go through incarceration because relationships are already hard enough, and then you add that barrier of incarceration, and it's just be very
Hmm.
complicated.
Right. And it has some, yeah, exactly. And it was. That's the point of the story. Um, Roy and Celeste become partners, right? And they get married. And shortly after the marriage, he is arrested for rape, falsely accused, and sent to prison. Is kind of like how it starts. But the first part of it talks about their lives. He grows up, I think, in a rural but more impoverished area. She grew up in an upper middle class or maybe an upper class. Her father was an inventor in the story, Celeste's father. So, so there's class issues that show up, there's racial issues that show up, there's injustices it show up too. And the way that prison affects people. And probably it was very actually disturbing to listen to this novel, right? It was just like disturbing kind of thing. So do you need to move? Well,
I'm moving right now.
okay. Yeah.
Oh, you're good. We can still chat.
All right. So where are you at again?
I'm not going to disclose the name of the library because I plan on coming here over and over, but I'm at a
Oh, are you
library
afraid that you're
near
going to
here.
not be able to come back if you disclose the library or
I
somebody's
don't
going to
want to
bother you?
disclose my location for safety reasons.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So I didn't think it was a secret library. It's a library, but you didn't want to expose, yeah, yourself for personal reasons.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I plan on using this space over and over and over, and I want to make sure that, yeah, I have some safety reasons from the past
It's
where.
okay. It's okay.
Thank
Yeah. I didn't mean to
you.
expose too much, but I was like,
Thank you.
maybe
I
we should
appreciate
explain. Yeah.
it. I have a bunch of books here, Max.
Apparently. So what books do you have before we come back to the American marriage?
Yeah, so the books that I have in my stack right now, and it's gonna build up because I just started grabbing books. Defying Hitler,
Mm-hmm.
but the Germans who resisted Nazi rule,
Mm-hmm.
How to Read Hitler, Countdown 1945, the extraordinary story of the atomic bomb and the 116 days that changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing Ever Dies, Vietnam and the Memory of War,
Mm-hmm.
and the French Revolution
Mm-hmm.
from Enlightenment to Tyranny.
Yeah. And how come you're getting these books?
I'm getting these books because it's important to understand history,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can, in order to understand current events and how current events impact our not only our current times but the future, we need to have a deep understanding of the past.
Mm,
So it's incredibly important to study about the past so you can understand present events.
mm-hmm.
Also, a lot of these books, our current administration are, um, it seems like they're trying to erase like indigenous, black, brown history, anything
Non-white,
that makes them,
non-white
anything,
history. Mm-hmm.
yeah, anything that makes America look bad. And I think that's very disturbing because of the fact that that is a sign of fascism when a government starts like banning books and closing libraries and attacking museums and freedom of speech and all of that. That is a strong indication of a slide into fascism and dictatorship and totalitarian regimes. And so my goal is to educate myself as much as possible, and I plan on eventually buying a lot of historical nonfiction books.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to look at like lists of books that they're banning and the histories that they're banning because I think it's um, we should have access to information and we should
Mm-hmm.
have free access to literature.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That
so
doesn't mean
yeah,
we have to agree with every book or the
yeah.
authors, but being able to express themselves, those authors. So it's another way of hiding things, just like prisons hide people, right? They hide and keep them away from others, as opposed to like in Europe where they're more involved in the local. I mean, they're in cities and they're not big ones in like rural areas far away. But where their voices, the voices, the First Amendment voices have been shut down in some of these places. And now
Mhm.
they have like prison radio and things like that at various places, like San Quentin has some of those kinds of programs. But you're right. So there's been some banning, and of course, different locations have different books that they might have, but there's a number of books. I was looking at the list on banned books, and there are a lot of books. Yeah. Not that I could read all of them or maybe some of them. I don't remember any that not interested in, but right. But they're trying to shut down things that aren't just mainstream white American, it sounds like. That paints us in that kind of way, including racial injustice, which is part of what the prison system, part of what the theme of an American marriage talks about, right? It talks about the racial injustice. Um, a white woman, I think it was a white woman, was raped in this hotel or motel they were staying at, and she identifies this guy, Roy, and Roy hadn't done it. And so it doesn't mean that she was purposely trying to point, but she thought that she said no. I think at one point when it talked about the court, uh, the courtroom, report, when she was giving evidence that she said, yeah, this is the guy. She gave an eyewitness ID of him, and he wasn't the guy. So it talked about these problems. It talked about the impoverishment that happens, and we can't just hide this. And we're actually right now creating more of it, right? So there are a number of issues that are intersecting all over this thing. I guess if I was a math major, I'd have all these axes coming from all over to this moment in time. So,
I I think I want to go back to what you were mentioning about how that man was falsely accused of sexual assault when he didn't commit the crime.
right. Hmm.
And so that's something that I find deeply distressing about our incarceration system, our justice system.
Hmm.
Oftentimes it's very unjust, where people are serving long terms for nonviolent crimes, and then for some reason there are violent offenders that get less times for crimes against other humans. And I can't understand that. Just the discrepancy, and a lot of it has to do with race and class, um, like social class and wealth access and all of that. And then I also find it very disturbing that in the United States, they reinstated the death penalty. And that they're also, that they've sent people, regardless if it's immigration or not, but the fact that they've sent people to Guantanamo Bay and to
El
El Salvador
Salvador. Mhm.
prisons, and it's like we're not, justice doesn't look like revenge. Justice doesn't look like
Well, it
torture.
does to some people, right? That's retributive justice, where we think that if we punish people, that somehow that's going to restore our relationships and our communities, and it doesn't work very well. That's why reparative interventions and restorative interventions are helpful. This book, An American Marriage, doesn't talk about that piece, but you can hear the pain that was going on that happened in the relationships because in part 3, when Roy gets out of prison, Andre and Celeste are connected on, and this is on a micro scale, right, a relational scale, but they were planning to get married or they were having a baby. And Roy was very angry about that, being falsely accused, being in prison, I think 5 years or 7 years. And so then he comes out and he's just very aggravated, and it becomes violent, right? He becomes violent towards Andre late in the book, which is very distressing because he feels like Andre, they all knew each other. Andre and Celeste had known each other basically all of their lives, and there had been kind of hints of romance, but then he gets out and then he's just been punished, and he's in there with his father. He actually ends up in the cell with his father Walter, who had not raised him. He was raised by a stepfather. And so he and his father are able to have some connection there. But when he gets out, he is so angry. And then we're approaching this, in such aggressive ways, and he's just furious. And what does he do with all that rage that he has when he finds out? So he gets in a very, he gets in an angry rage, and he hits and beats up Andre. And then he takes this old tree called Old Hickory and he starts chopping at it. And he didn't destroy it. They actually were, the tree didn't die, but he caused some damage to it out of just sheer anger. And we have that anger, but what do we do with it? The book doesn't get into restorative justice, but you can hear these themes and these possibilities on micro scales, and then on macro scales, we could look at the justice system. What is really just, right? What is just? Is it just to put people away, sometimes falsely accused? And there's a bias clearly towards people, African Americans, and other people of color, but large numbers of Black men end up in prison. And you go, partly because of poverty and other issues and the ways that we cope. I mean, that's where those intersections start to happen. So it's pulling that in, but it's kind of achy because you can kind of feel what this would feel like for all of these characters, how they struggled with it. And Roy was planning to divorce. She didn't want to get a divorce. Then later she realized she couldn't sustain the marriage anymore. And when he got out, it was basically over. And so that, they weren't able to, they had been writing a lot, but they weren't, I mean, there were some visits, but I think there was some distance between that. So you just start to see all these kinds of issues in just this novel. And I was really disturbed, probably because it was a novel and you can hear the angst as the narrators or the readers are describing this, the pain inside of each of them, how their perspectives are, because you will come from like Roy's and then Celeste and Andre's perspective. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, things that are happening now on a bigger scale, you go, why are these things being pushed to the side? Like it's not happening. And you're talking about the death penalty. I think in the next, through May 1st or May, there are 5 scheduled, uh, that, uh, I was going to say assassinations, but
That's what
corporate,
it is.
yeah, they're going to be killed, right? There's going to be
It's murder.
different methods. Yeah. And there that was already going on, but it's now seems to be accelerating now that the president said federally, because the Boston Marathon bomber was also they didn't want to let him off of from for him to face capital punishment. So yeah.
It's
That,
disturbing to me that there is justice for some and not justice for all. Like the
mhm.
January 6th insurrection that occurred in the White House, where people were terrorizing humans and assaulting them and almost murdering people, causing brain injuries,
Death,
PTSD,
suicide. Yeah.
suicidal issues. There was feast is smeared on the wall and things were burned and glass was broken and people's lives were threatened. I just can't understand how those people were pardoned and released. And some
Mhm.
of those people were also like I consider that a form of domestic terrorism, but some of those people were in extremist groups and
Mhm.
some of them were,
Proud
there was
Boys, Oath
a sex
Keepers.
offender. There was
Hmm.
like a pedophile too, and
Mm.
all sorts of things. I'm like, why are we forgiving those people
Hmm.
who committed an act of domestic terrorism and assault on other humans' lives, including peace officers?
Hmm.
And we're sending people like a gay barber to El Salvador
Right,
who did it, and people treating people to be tortured when they didn't even commit a crime.
right.
And so that's why I question
Or a
also,
husband of another guy is sent there, and
yeah,
they're saying he needs to come back by today because
yeah,
he
but
hadn't done anything
the
wrong.
federal judge ordered them to be come back, but then the Trump administration said, well, basically, good luck with that. We don't have jurisdiction over El Salvador. There's nothing we can do, and that's unacceptable because this country violates laws on a
Hmm.
global level all the time and funds genocide and
Hmm.
murders and inserts themselves in countries all the time. Why can't they
We're a
insert
very
themselves in
violent country.
why
Mhm.
can they not insert themselves in El Salvador to rescue those humans?
Right.
They can do it in other countries to murder terrorists and to fund genocide, but they made a clerical error, a clerical administrative
Right.
error, and they
Mhm.
sent humans to be tortured when they no one should have been sent there to be tortured to begin with, and that facility
Right,
shouldn't
because
even
it's
be
a
in existence.
dangerous facility in El Salvador, apparently.
Mhm,
Right. Hmm.
mhm. And going back to the specific book that you were reading,
An American
I
marriage.
the
Uh-huh.
American marriage, yes.
Un-American marriage. I keep saying
I
but yeah, it's not a big thing. Yeah.
I think that the anger that he felt isn't valid to hurt other people,
No, it's not.
but it's also understandable the frustration, rage, and anger, because could you imagine being accused of a sex crime, doing 5 years and then coming out? How do you think people in society are going to treat you?
Right.
Whether it's family members or people in living on your neighborhood, you get put on a special sex offender registry list. You get banned from
He
getting good
wouldn't be
jobs.
once he was exonerated. Um, so he was released. But if he came out with a sex offense, he would have to register. Like in
But
Colorado, he'd have to register.
what I'm trying to get at is the stigma associated with being accused of a sex crime, regardless if
Right.
you are
Hmm.
guilty of it or not.
Hmm.
Sometimes people will treat you as if you're guilty no matter what, no matter if you get exonerated, no matter if you're released. I feel like that's a stigma and a label that's placed on someone
It
that
could
some
show
people
up
will,
when they do a background check that he was
yeah,
arrested, even though he was eventually released.
yeah.
Right. And I
It's
understand
disturbing.
in the book it talked about misconduct. That's what they were accusing the people doing the investigation of. So here you have a life that's just kind of thrown away or really damaged. And now he's been out of the workforce for 5 years. Like, what's
Yeah.
he coming back to? Plus the stigma that, well, where have you been? I was in prison. Then you have to tell this story. I was falsely accused. What were you accused of? I was accused of a sex offense. I mean, yeah, that is a lot to come back. So no, I wasn't justifying the the violence, but the anger that all of us can
Mhm.
feel and what to do with it. And that's where restorative nonviolent methods can come in. So how do we heal that so it doesn't just come out on other people? And how could he, for his sake, for the society, but especially for his sake? Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I I don't know about his story. Um, I just know that I just think about things also as like if it was released to the press, like if his case hit the press,
It
hit the
was in the
news.
paper in his hometown, small paper. I don't know
Yeah,
how far it would have gone, but it
but
could have
that's
ended
very
up in
damning. That's
Atlanta's
very
paper. Hmm.
damaging to
Can
someone's
be,
reputation
sure.
and living in a small town where there's already kind of like not all small towns are like this, but there's more of an, like people know each other.
Hmm.
There's people are protective of their community and people are quick to judge in small communities.
Hmm.
And I can't imagine being accused of a crime that you don't commit and then having to do time for it and then being released. I'd be full of rage. I'd be full of fear. I would be afraid of the justice system and law enforcement at that point.
Hmm.
And it's like a breakdown of trust when the criminal justice system fails people,
Hmm.
it breaks down a sense of trust
Right.
in law enforcement and trust in the judges
Whether
and
that's
trust.
a federal illegal immigrant accusation or a more local kind of being accused of sexual assault, either
Yeah.
one of those, when justice isn't being really served. Yeah. And he was impoverished, right? Well, not impoverished. He came from working class, I mean. So, yeah, he may not be able to afford someone who's like, he may not be able to afford that, the representation. Not that public defenders, but they can be very well, very stretched thin. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the criminal justice system, it seems like the more access you have to funds, the more wealth you have, the more prominence you have,
Right.
you can essentially get away with committing crimes and not even doing any time for it. And it's very,
Yeah.
it should not be like that.
Well,
It shouldn't matter.
white collar
Huh?
crimes now are not going to be prosecuted. Like Khan, right, was doing that from one of the, what was the FCC or the what was she in charge of? But anyway, she was going after places like Google and large corporations, right? And the Department of Justice was following up with that. And some of that isn't going to be happening. So you have white collar crimes that are going to be prosecuted even less often than you have these other crimes. And people think that they're safer when people go to prison. And that isn't actually the case. Because look what happened. Not that Roy was going to beat up anybody other than Andre, because this was like he felt like the guy stole his wife, you know, which you don't own. Celeste's dad says, I don't own her. She doesn't belong. I mean, she's my daughter, but doesn't belong to me. And that was very clear they reminded us at the end of the book about that the father did not, because Roy goes to the father and they try to work through it. And it's not how they saw it. But they made choices that were very frustrating and not very forthcoming. There was just a lot of distance withdrawal that started to happen. And you could just hear this, and it would take a lot of work to keep the marriage going. But yeah, like then you have all this frustration. Yeah, that what's, yeah, there's just a lot going on here. Big, little in the book, and that represents society. Plus, he's black in the book. So there's a bias against him to begin with. And then you add another bias that he's been prosecuted. Then you have another bias that he's sexually assaulted. Oh, he's unsafe. So he's gonna, he doesn't go into that much because the book ends after he's not out very long before it ends. I think it might be a little bit after that that it ends up. I wanted to say the reason I'm reading the book is because I'm part of the Sentencing Project's book club, and their book for March and April was An American Marriage. And I was like, why did they pick that book? And then, because I wasn't sure, because I work with, I do therapy with couples and individuals about relationships. And I go, what did, and then I saw what their point was. And I go,
Mhm,
oh, this is why they chose that book. And it's a fairly easy, because it's a novel, fairly easy to read.
mhm,
Emotionally, I think it's hard to read. It was hard. I was cringing at places. The
mhm,
values that were part of this before they even got married. Um, kind of the romance piece of thing, what our values are, what we value. So there's more violence in there because we have capitalism on top of it. And not capitalism with sympathy and empathy, but with, like trying to get our way to the top. Not that people in the book were doing that, but they're just part of that culture. So there were themes coming out all over the place there.
nice. I'm glad that you're part of that book club. If you can,
It's a
um,
Facebook, it's on Facebook, the Sentencing Project Book Club. Um, yeah, I think I was part of I was a Facebook follower or something, and then they started it last year. I think I've read all the books that I mean they've only gone, this is like the third book, maybe the fourth book that they have done. They have one every 2 months from till the rest of the year this
I
year.
made a
So
note because I want to look up information about their book club so that I can include it in the comments section. So that way, if anyone
wonderful.
wants
Yeah.
to start reading about incarceration books.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
important to understand these issues. Like, you don't have to have a family member or friend or be incarcerated yourself to care about the justice system and to understand restorative justice and why we shouldn't be doing things like the death penalty and why we shouldn't be sending people to torture prisons. So I think it's important for the community to educate themselves about, the racial disparities in incarceration and how it impacts the BIPOC community, how it impacts family members, friends, and the community, and the importance of rehabilitation and how we can support other people's rehabilitation.
Yeah. Right. Because I don't think Roy had any preparation upon leaving to get out. He was just kind of like released, which is a wonderful day. But, where's he got, he already had a career, but that was interrupted. So, yeah.
People who are incarcerated and then released, they really need to have access to rehabilitation programs and therapy programs and
They call it
um,
reentry a lot, but
mhm.
reentry kind of, yeah, housing and education, skill building, and some of that, they can get in prison, but then they need some afterwards too. And not everybody's going to qualify or be able to do it in prison. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
to be successful.
as community members, though, we can educate ourselves on ways that we can provide support for those who are trying to turn their lives around.
Right. Yeah, I did. I some of the assumptions that we make because of tough on crime kind of positions that we tend to take, thinking that punishing people will be effective and keep everybody safe. Now, there are many people, yeah, that probably do need to be very much secured, right? More security. But many people, have had drug issues. They had issues that they may have been in foster care or impoverished, and then they're coming out of that. And then people fall into alcoholism and drugs. And then, I mean, you could just see how that happens on the front end, investing some of that money, and on the back end, like you were talking about, and the community coming to support these people. And when I worked in corrections, I did know that some people would support these individuals like from a halfway house. They would give them rides, give them jobs, they try to support them. But they, obviously they need more of that because, I mean, there's biases in housing. Oh, do you have a felony? Well, yeah, probably if you went to prison. But that doesn't mean those people, some of these people are, some people will be supervised, highly supervised, and are less likely to offend in a business than people who are just off, who haven't been in prison. So I've
Yeah.
heard this, yeah, like sex offenders are very supervised. Now, you got to be careful. I mean, but that doesn't mean that they will reoffend. But people are like, oh my gosh, no, they're actually very supervised because of the amount of, like, depending on what the level of a violation is. I didn't know that very long ago. There's a lot of assumptions that we make. That doesn't mean that people don't reoffend. I'm not saying that, but there are people that are very effective predators who are going after people, grooming them, and very charming about it. Very, very hard to catch.
And a lot of people getting away with it,
That's what I
especially
mean.
like
Yeah.
it's terrifying. And I know you like to post that I posted the other day, and it was mentioning how like it could be anyone. It could be a family member, a close family friend who people think is a great human being, and oh wow. And those are
Right.
the people that's why you need to talk with your children in your family, in your household, and you need to talk to them about safety and what's not okay, what grooming is, what it looks like, what to watch out for, what to, you know, something happens or something makes you feel uncomfortable, speak up, say something to more than one person until something happens. And I can't stress enough the importance of we need to look out for each other as a community, and we need to be more educated about these issues so that way we can prevent crimes from occurring, or if they occur, we can know what are the warning signs to look out for and what are the steps to report and how can we assist people in their trauma recovery and healing.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. Exactly. We're going to run out of time here. So we want to be able to wrap up an American marriage, which, yeah. So of course we don't want children to be impacted. So many people can be impacted. Like 1 out of 6 females and 1 out of 10 males can be affected. That's a lot of people. And sometimes it's some of the same individuals and often could be somebody close to them. So
I
an American
think the numbers are actually higher, but
well,
it's because of
the
the
numbers,
underreporting.
the well, right. But that's the numbers that generally are, they can be higher. And so the methods that we're using aren't working. So we need better methods. And it isn't just detecting, it's healing, because a lot of the people who are doing this, right, are people who have been victimized themselves.
Mhm.
So how do we stop this without just punishing more, that would be like segments worth of sessions. But and maybe we can address that.
Mhm.
So there are people who talk about that. But the wrap up an American marriage by Tayara Rari Jones. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that. Tayari Jones. It probably the the book, the video or the audio book probably had it, but I didn't quite catch it. So talking about Roy and Celeste's marriage is basically most of the book, but it brings in and intersects a lot of the struggles that we're dealing with today on a macro scale, on a big scale, and for them on a micro scale. So racial injustice, injustice in the court system, criminal, prosecution, misconduct, things like that. So I thought it was I was really touched by this book. So I really encourage people to listen to it. It is an easy book to read, or to listen to. So, that it doesn't have a lot of facts, but it's hard emotionally because you will go, oh, that's what it would be like. And you get a feel for it. So thanks, June, for
Yeah,
joining
thank
me
you.
today from a library somewhere in the world.
Somewhere in
So,
Colorado.
yeah. So Colorado, there you go. So we will see you. This is Max and June pair up side by side with June and Max. Okay.
Thank you guys for joining. Bye.